I'm going to build on what Andy talked about with the basics, going on composition, framing, depth of field, and add in an element of beyond natural lighting. This can be flashes, strobes, lamps, or even modifying light using the windows in your house. So, light, as we all know, enables the person looking, or the sensor absorbing, or the film absorbing to see an image. Most of the time we modify that light in the camera itself by putting things on the lens or adjusting the settings Andy talked about, the aperture, the film speed, or ISO. What we want to try and do here is looking at adjusting the environment. Say you've got a point and click. There's not a lot of control on that. What you could do is take your house lamp, move it in, and try and modify the scene that way. Like Andy said, move the people in the scene over a little bit. Control the people, control the environment, instead of trying to make your phone do what that is trying to. So, depth of field. First thing with light is a lot of these cameras have built-in flashes, your phone, things like that. And when you use those, you're getting rid of a lot of your depth of field because it can't reach what's in the background there. So your subject is well lit, your foreground is overlit, and your background doesn't exist anymore. I've turned the forest into a cave with that picture. Once you do something like move in an external light, the background can show up, and you kind of bring everything out and brighten it up and give it outlines. Unfortunately, remembering where things are in the scene is still important. So keep in mind. And like Andy said, positioning your subjects is the same thing as positioning the objects you're using in your scene. Shadows. When you start using light, you're going to use shadows either intentionally or not so intentionally. Not so intentionally. What Andy talked about and what Carrie's spoken about before with what you're giving to someone who's going to use this, say they're using it for a design, this is going to be very hard to work with. It's just a dark area that's now a blob. You can probably see that one there a little better. It's a shadow on a dark object, projected out as one big shadow. So just moving things around in the background again. Might clear that one up. I know I'm going to be using a whole bunch of verbiage here. So I wanted to kind of give definitions of what these things are, and starting with a snoot as a noun or a verb. A snoot is this. This is cinefoil. It's aluminum foil with a matte black cover to absorb light. And now it's a snoot. A snoot is just a tube that directs the light, so it spills only where you want it. Diffusion. Another prop. I'm enjoying the props today. Tupperware. Or you've probably seen larger cloth diffusion for soft boxes, they're called, or even your curtains. Any of these things will work really well to spread out and make light softer, gentler on a subject. Put this stuff back down under here, 1 second. Directional light. You see there, diffuse and sharp, what I was talking about with diffusion. That is in that first image and the second image you saw where you're highlighting the side of your model to make them stand out from the background. Lens flare, we haven't gone over, but I'll get to that one shortly. It's light unintentionally or intentionally entering the lens directly. So if you point the light at the lens, you're going to get flare off of that. And I'll show you what I mean in a bit. And light pollution is definitely unintentionally, I'll show examples of that, light entering the lens, usually from slightly outside of it. Putting all of that together, that scene contains all of those different elements in one shot. Flare, diffusion, reflection, diffraction. It's fun. It's also pretty much straight up physics. All of these elements are the behavior of light. So I tend to think of light as rays. Most people kind of picture it as a blanket covering their subject. But if you picture it as rays, you're going to get a better image of what that light is going to do. When it hits a subject, is it going to reflect? Is it going to absorb? Is it going to do a little bit of both? Reflection and refraction tend to be very similar. They make the images bounce off. So if you have a marble on a glass desk, you're going to see the marble reflecting the desk, reflecting the marble, reflecting the desk. It's fun. If you've got a curved bowl, diffraction is going to let you see through the bowl, but warped. And then scattering and diffusion, that last picture with the fog and the mist or sunlight through clouds, it's going to gentle that light for you. So how do we apply that? Well, this and our Tupperware are really, really helpful in photography, especially do-it-yourself. And if you don't happen to have cinefoil, matte black construction paper, cloth, anything that doesn't reflect and is posable is going to help you. So here's 3 different examples of what these modifiers do to your light. This is just a generic ambient light in the background. This is shooting off the flash, and you see everything in the scene. And this is what snooting does for you. It directs that light to your subject, leaving that nice black, dark background for you without showing you the checkers on the floor. You can still see all the details of the hat and the highlights on the table. Very useful in a scene. Also very useful for catching attention to action. And that's just this. These are 50 feet for $30, I believe, when you go with a name brand. If you go with construction paper, a lot less. My favorite model. Really hard to work with this guy. Directional light in the first one. You can see a cast shadow coming out the back. So this is your ceiling lights. And you've got your subject against the wall to take their portrait, and you're like, why do I keep getting that shadow in the back? So you turn on your flash to try and get rid of it, and instead you get a small shadow here and a shadow in the back. Okay? The way to solve this one is diffusion. If you put that Tupperware on, you're still gonna have that shadow, but it's much gentler because it's got competing light coming in from the side, and you're not casting a shadow back by blasting that light straight on. Those rays again, gentler all around, wider.
Blocking the light.
Yeah. Or even on the flash of your camera. If you've got like a Tupperware cover and a little home camera, piece of tape, right over the light, much better, much closer to that. Won't be exactly because your light is right above your lens, but it will help. Getting a little more advanced with those, when you put stuff over your light is when you're going to want to start looking at hooding. And you can even hood your light, and I'll show you how to do that really quickly. Backlighting and side lighting, I kind of talked about a little with that first picture of the model showing for some contrast. We'll have some fun with that. So, here's my tools, my Tupperware. This is our light pollution that I was talking about. You see the object that disappears there is my lens hood. And I know a lot of people get the camera and have the lens hood and have no idea why it's there. It's to prevent, whoops, not that. Well, it's to prevent that light pollution from entering. And I'll show you a direct example here of hooding the light instead of the lens. So we've got a giant spotlight on the side there with my assistant Vanna, who's my fiance Erin, and my friend throwing. We're trying to capture that action again by highlighting the object and the model and leaving the background dark. So I've pointed the camera towards me, which now means it's blasting right into the lens. More of this. Right across the light itself means my subject is still getting hit, much like you can still see me, but the light is getting blocked from coming straight at the lens and polluting the environment. This stuff is great. It's so posable. You can make it into whatever shape you need at the moment, which is like why I like this option, and it's very reusable. I used this for everything in there. That also means you can kind of start setting up scenes at home, kind of leading you towards a makeshift studio. If you look at this light is still there, it's just covered. So you've still got everything lit in your scene, but you're not getting that pollution again. Also means you can start doing things like adding extra colors in. You know, most of your desk lamps have that red tint. Most of your ceiling lights will have those. Or if you buy a natural light or a tungsten light, they're blue tinted. You can start kind of mixing and matching and creating intentional other sources of light in your scenes. And then if you have a little fun in Photoshop, completely removing the light source. So you just get a random highlight of another color on an object. Fun stuff to play around with at a home studio, and it doesn't cost you anything. You're taking your same lamps. Combining all of those, these are the effects you end up with. That last one is just diffusion using intentional lens flare, backlighting to highlight action, and a spotlight on the front. That's it. I'm hoping I inspired some of you to come in and try the studio. Try any of this out. We're there, the gear's there. It's fun.